Welcome back. Part 3 is here. We're going to talk about how to promote and enroll people into your retreat. It doesn't do much good if you build this incredible experience and nobody comes. So let's make sure to fill that retreat with amazing people and people who might enroll in your big back end. This is the part of the design process where some people stall out and make expensive mistakes. And I want to make sure that that does not happen to you. Here's a quick overview of what I'll be covering in this video. First, why you should sell it first before it's even fully built out, how to promote without a huge following or ad budget, how to prepare the retreat before you ever show up on site, and the one thing that people do first that they should do last and that they spend way too much time and effort and money on, and what to focus on instead. So once your design is done, we talked about that in part 2 video, there's a temptation to keep going back to the design phase and keep tweaking and adjusting. And my invitation to you is to not do that and instead to start focusing your effort on getting ready to sell. One of my mantras is sell it first, figure it out later. I know that to some of you might sound a little bit irresponsible, like to sell something that isn't fully fleshed out or figured out. But here's what I know for sure. Number one, we can prepare and prepare and prepare and never be ready for what actually happens on site at the event. And there can sometimes be a belief and an imposter syndrome of like, I have to prepare more and more and more. And generally, there's diminishing returns to that much preparation. In my opinion, you're better at taking all of that energy and focusing it in on having meaningful conversations with people who might enroll and also give you their feedback and their ideas about what they need most so you can work that into the actual retreat itself design. I know how it goes. There's such a temptation to focus on the content, focus on the 3-day, 4-day experience, to focus on the meals and the amenities, to find the perfect venue, to secure the perfect venue so that you know that you have it and give a big fat deposit. These are all things that people do that I don't recommend, quite honestly, at this juncture. And it's the reason that many first retreats never actually happen. The antidote is, like I said, sell it first, figure it out later. So my whole thing is that the very first thing you want to do is decide and commit. Now, you don't have to commit at this juncture to an actual venue. Most people can sign up for a retreat if they just know the city and the dates. And I should have put that in the other order. It should be the dates and the city. So you don't have to have everything all figured out in order to enroll people in a retreat. And in fact, for years, this is how I did it. I'd set the dates, I'd set the city, I'd enroll, and then based on the number of people I had, I would go find a venue. Now that might sound a little scary to some of you, but it's really not that hard to find a venue for 10, 15, even 20 people. Now, if we're talking 200 people, that's a whole nother story, but that's not what we're talking about here with this model. With this model, you can rent a VRBO or an Airbnb for $500 a night and probably put 8 to 10 people in there, no problem, in a lot of different places. Maybe not in the most expensive markets in the country, but certainly in certain places like Texas and Utah and Idaho and Michigan. You can find amazing venues that'll host you for not that much money. So as long as you know the dates and the city, you can start enrolling people. By the way, before I get any further down this rabbit hole, I got really excited, I got ahead of myself. I do want to invite you to please like this video, subscribe to my channel, throw down a comment below, let me know what part of the process that you're in right now. Let's get back to talking about deciding and committing and venues, because the venue is the place where people tend to blow their money. And it also is the thing that gives the most pressure to the situation. If you're committing to a venue that has no cancellations and you're having to put down a hefty deposit or worse yet, pay in full up front, the problem with that is that it creates pressure and a little bit of desperation sometimes, and that energy transfers into your marketing and your sales. It's a very different thing to have a conversation with the prospect, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but it's a very different thing to have a conversation with somebody and enroll them from a place of, hey, I'm doing this incredible thing. I'd love for you to join me. I'd love for you to get this outcome for yourself, to have this experience, this transformation. It's quite another thing to do that conversation from the energy of, I've got to make this sale. I've got to make this money. I've got to enroll another person in my retreat because I'm running out of time on my deposit. There's a very different frequency there. And I've seen it over and over again. I wouldn't say it if this wasn't something that I see all the time. When there's a lot of pressure on this model, I don't think that the model works as well. For the obvious reason that I just said, because the retreat itself, the enrollment process gets kind of, that icky feeling that comes with all that pressure. But also because then you're starting the relationship with that. And if you're going to enroll somebody into the big back end and work with them for a year or 5 years even, you want a relationship that's really built on service and trust, right? You don't want to be someone who's attached to making a sale, because that energy leaks into the whole relationship, if that makes any sense. And I hope it does, because I see it all the time. And it's one of these more kind of under the surface things that I see that's not quite so obvious. And so here's one more thing about why I say decide and commit. It's very tempting when you're in this process and you're not maybe getting all the enrollments that you want to say, oh, I'm just going to cancel my retreat, or I'm just going to reschedule it, I'm going to move it. I see people do this all the time. They come to me and they say, oh, I've rescheduled my retreat like 4 or 5 times. I've been wanting to do this for years, but it never quite works out. I can never, get to that retreat-filled state. And I remember this feeling because actually I wanted to do a retreat and I was really nervous about filling it. And my first retreat, I had 4 people. And 3 of those 4 people signed up for my big back end. I never had that high of a conversion rate again. So there's something to be said about a small retreat that's mighty and that's filled with the right people that know you, like you, trust you already as a way to get started, which leads me to promote and enroll, point number 2, where I start with outreach. So my whole thing is that if you can start your retreat model and fill your very first 1 or 2 or 3 or however many retreats with people who already know you, like you, trust you, then that's going to give you that sort of confidence. It gives you a way to have some wins out of the gate. So I'm a big fan, actually, of your very first retreat, maybe even taking some pressure off it by calling it a beta retreat or a founder's retreat or something that lowers the stakes a little bit so there's not so much pressure on it. And then you reach out to people who already are in your network. Reach out to friends, reach out to colleagues, people who are more likely to say yes, and invite them to have a meaningful conversation. Now that's a whole nother thing I'm not going to dive deeply into here, which is how to do sales. I call my sales process sales as service. I developed it back when I started selling retreats. I literally learned a sales process from Jake, my mentor, and then adapted it for a more, honestly, feminine approach because it was kind of an aggressive sales style. And I've changed it to make it more authentic to me. And actually, you can find Sales as Service, my sales training, here on YouTube. I think I have a 2 or even a 3-part series just on Sales as Service, and I highly recommend that. So that'll walk you through the exact words I use, the script, the process, all of it. But this part here, my advice is to lower the stakes. Don't invest too much money up front. Make the sales first, because here's what I've learned. If you have the dates and you have the city and you have the sales, you will figure out everything else. You will find a venue. You will get creative, right? There's something about having made that commitment to people that puts your batteries in and gets you going. So my advice is promote and enroll. Consider maybe a beta retreat or something that's smaller that takes the pressure off, and start having meaningful conversations. Learn the Sales as Service structure. It will absolutely transform your enrollment. And then lastly, prepare and plan. Now, as I said in the beginning of the video, a lot of people take this piece and move it to the front. And I recommend doing things in this order because this becomes so much easier when you have money, when you've been paid. Oh, speaking of been paid, I'm a big believer in collecting payment up front. At the very least, collecting a non-refundable deposit, because that gives you the money to then go and get your venue, to make that deposit, to buy things, to And it feels good to create from that space instead of pulling from your pocket and investing. You're getting paid to produce this thing now. So prepare and plan is where we get into taking the money that we've earned up above and investing it in finding the venue and buying materials and equipment and things like that. And it's also where we focus on developing our offer and our invite for the big back end. This is where I want you to not wait until the very last minute, which so many people do. They wait until the day before, the night before. And honestly, I've done it where I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to offer? Don't do that. I'm inviting you to do that up front and really think about that enrollment into what is it that you're creating for that ongoing mastery, that ongoing transformation. Speaking of transformation, let's talk about designing the arc of transformation. In a retreat, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's a whole journey that you're taking people on to achieve that promise. This is a really good time to design that arc of transformation specifically. We've already committed to that promise. We know what the outcome is. Now, looking at based on who you're enrolling, who's coming in, what they're telling you about what they need, you can really design that arc of transformation to meet their needs especially. So I'm a big fan of doing that here, and it'll also inform your sales as you go along, because the idea here is that you're promoting and enrolling as you're collecting and investing and building and planning. There's one more thing I haven't really talked about too much, and that is marketing your retreat. I have a lot of videos about how to market retreat, so I invite you to invest some time in watching those because I go into a lot of detail about different methodologies. But one thing that I'll say about marketing your retreat is this: I wouldn't actually market your retreat. Back to what we talked about in the last two videos, my advice for you is that you really focus on marketing the problem and the possibility, and let the retreat just be one way that you offer a solution for that. So instead of going around everywhere and being like, hey, are you interested in my 3-day retreat? Hey, are you interested in my retreat? Hey, are you interested in my program? Which is really selling the medicine, not the cure. Ultimately, what people want is that they want to solve that problem and they want to achieve this possibility, this transformation. So I would focus more on marketing and selling that. Like, for example, for me, I don't really market the 3-day retreat. What I market is have a big back end, stop the revenue roller coaster, get off the hamster wheel. The solution to that is let's have a conversation. Let's have a meaningful conversation. And if it's a right fit, then I have solutions, one of which is my 3-day retreat. I don't actually focus a lot on marketing the 3-day retreat. You won't really see Facebook posts about my 3-day retreat. Now, I'm not saying that's wrong or bad. All I'm saying is that puts the marketing more as like this push approach, whereas when you market the problem solution, the problem and the possibility, it attracts people who are curious and learning about how they might solve their problem, and then the retreat becomes a solution to that problem and much more compelling. All right, kids, in part 4, we'll cover what happens on site, how to deliver a phenomenal retreat experience, how to enroll into the big back end, and then how to delight your clients for hopefully years to come. And if you're wondering what your big back end could look like, what your retreat could look like, how to market and sell your retreats, let's connect. Go to superstaractivator.com/go to explore if and how one of my programs might be able to help you. See you soon.